The call came at 6:47 in the morning, and I remember the exact time because I'd been awake since 5, sitting at my kitchen table in Guelph with a cup of tea that had gone cold, watching the snow come down outside my window and thinking about nothing in particular. And then my phone rang, and everything I thought I knew about my family started to come apart at the seams. My mother had died in the night. A stroke. The hospital said she never woke up. I drove the 2.5 hours to Barrie in a kind of trance. The roads were bad. It was February, and the 400 was slick with black ice, but I barely noticed. I kept thinking about the last time I'd seen her, 3 weeks before Christmas, when she'd made butter tarts and complained about the cold getting into her knees. She'd seemed fine. She'd seemed like she always did. And now she was gone, and I was driving north in the dark, and somewhere in the back of my mind, a small voice was saying, "You don't know what's coming." I should have listened to it. My brother was already at the house when I arrived. He'd driven up from Mississauga the night before, he said, when the hospital first called. He was sitting at Mom's kitchen table with a coffee and a look on his face that I couldn't quite read. Not grief exactly, something tighter than that. Something that had been rehearsed. We didn't hug. We never really did, even as kids. He's 4 years older than me, and for most of my life, that gap felt like a wall. He was the one who got the car at 16, who got the bigger bedroom, who got pulled aside at family dinners to talk about adult things while I was still expected to help clear the plates. I'd always told myself it was just birth order, that it didn't mean anything. But standing in my mother's kitchen that morning, looking at the way he was sitting, comfortable, settled, like the house already belonged to him, I started to wonder if I'd been wrong about that for a very long time. "There's a lot to sort out," he said, before I'd even taken my coat off. I said I knew. "I've already called the funeral home," he said, "and I think we should talk about the property." I looked at him. "Can we get through the funeral first?" He gave me a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Of course," he said. "Of course. I just wants to be on the same page." I didn't know what page he thought we were on. I didn't know yet that he'd already turned ahead to the last chapter without telling me. Mom's service was held 4 days later at the church she'd gone to since before I was born. It was a Thursday afternoon, cold and grey, the kind of February day that feels like the sky is pressing down on everything. There were maybe 60 people there, neighbors, old friends, a few cousins I hadn't seen in years. I sat in the front pew next to my brother and his wife, and I held it together through the hymns and the readings and the part where the minister talked about what a warm and generous woman she was. It was in the parking lot afterward, while people were still milling around in the cold, that things went wrong. My brother pulled me aside, near the rear bumper of his SUV. His wife had drifted away to talk to someone. He waited until we were more or less alone, and then he said, very quietly, "I need you to know that I've spoken to a lawyer." I stared at him. "What about the estate?" he said. "About the house?" He paused, and then he said the thing that I still hear sometimes when I'm trying to fall asleep. "Mom changed her will 2 years ago. She left everything to me. The house, the savings account, everything." He looked at me steadily. "You were always more independent. You moved away. You had your own life. She wanted to make sure I was taken care of." I didn't say anything for a moment. The wind was coming off the parking lot in gusts, and somewhere behind us, someone was crying. A real unguarded kind of crying, the kind that sounds like it's being pulled out of a person. And I stood there in my black coat thinking, this is not real. This is not happening at my mother's funeral. "She never told me that," I finally said. "She never even." I stopped. I could feel people nearby. I could feel eyes. "We'll talk about this later," I said. "There's nothing really to talk about," he said. Not unkindly. That was almost the worst part. "I just wanted you to hear it from me." His wife reappeared at his elbow. She linked her arm through his and gave me a look. Not hostile exactly, but careful. Measured, like she was watching to see how I'd take it. I drove back to my mother's house alone and sat in the driveway for 20 minutes before I could make myself go inside. The next morning, I found the locksmith's card on the kitchen counter. It was tucked under the sugar bowl, like it was nothing, like it was a receipt from the grocery store. The company name was in blue, and someone had circled the number in pen, my brother's handwriting, I could tell. I stood there holding it for a long time. When he came downstairs, I asked him about it directly. He said he was going to have the locks changed before he put the house on the market. He said it in a completely normal voice, like this was a completely normal thing to say. Like I hadn't been coming to this house my whole life, like my key wasn't still on my keychain. I live 2.5 hours away, I said. I'm not going to just drop in. It's just practical, he said, for the listing. I looked at him across my mother's kitchen, her curtains, her dishes, her calendar still open to February on the wall, and I thought, something is wrong here. Something has been wrong for a long time and I haven't seen it. I want to see the will, I said. Of course, he said. I'll have the lawyer send you a copy. He never did. I drove back to Guelph that afternoon. I couldn't stay in that house. I called my best friend from the car. She'd known since university, and she listened to the whole thing without interrupting, which is one of the things I love most about her. And by the time I got home, she had the name of an estate lawyer in Waterloo that her cousin had used. I booked an appointment for the following week. The lawyer's name was Mr. Achterberg, and he had the kind of quiet, unhurried manner that I found deeply reassuring in those first few weeks when everything felt like it was moving too fast. I brought everything I had. The cards my mother had sent me over the years, some old emails, a photo of the two of us at her kitchen table the previous Easter. I didn't know what I was building a case for yet. I just knew something felt wrong. He listened carefully, then he asked me one question that changed everything. Did your mother ever mention a trust? He said. And then I remembered, barely, like trying to catch something on the edge of sleep, a conversation from maybe 3 years ago. My mother and I had been on the phone, and she'd said something about talking to her bank about setting something aside for me. I'd thought she meant a savings bond or something small. I hadn't thought about it since. Mr. Achterberg requested the full estate documents through proper legal channels. What came back took my breath away. My mother hadn't just left a will, she'd established a trust, a registered account through her bank, set up 5 years earlier, with me named as the sole beneficiary. It was separate from the estate entirely, which meant it didn't pass through probate and couldn't be touched by whatever will my brother was waving around. The value of it was just over $180,000. My brother, it turned out, had known about it. He had gone to the bank 2 weeks after her death, before I'd even gotten a copy of anything, and tried to have the account restructured. He told them he was the estate trustee and that there had been a family agreement about the funds. The bank had flagged it as irregular and declined to proceed without documentation. He had pushed back, and they had declined again, and then they had noted the interaction in the file. Mr. Achterberg put the papers down on his desk very carefully, the way you put something down when you want to be sure it doesn't make a sound. He knew about this account, he said. Yes, I said. And he attempted to access it. Yes, that's not a misunderstanding, he said. That's a very deliberate act. I won't pretend the next few months were easy. There's a version of this story where I say I was strong the whole time, where I never cried in a parking lot or ate cereal for dinner 3 nights in a row because I couldn't make myself cook. That version would be a lie. I was 31 years old, I had just lost my mother, and the person I'd grown up thinking of as family was trying to take the last thing she'd left me. I was barely keeping it together. But I had Mr. Achterberg, and I had my friend, and I had, though I didn't know it yet, something even better. My mother had kept records of everything. I don't know when I realized it, but at some point I remembered that she'd had this habit, an old-fashioned one, something her own mother had done, of keeping a little notebook by the phone in the kitchen. Not a diary exactly, more like a log. Who called, what was said, anything she wanted to remember. She'd done it her whole adult life. Dozens of these notebooks, going back decades, stacked in a box in the closet of the spare room. I asked my brother if I could go through some of Mom's things before the house sold. He said yes. I think he thought I meant jewelry or photographs. He gave me a date and a 2-hour window and sent his wife to supervise. I went straight for the closet. There were 43 notebooks. I sat on the floor of that spare room and went through all of them. My mother's handwriting, small and very neat. And there, in a notebook from about 18 months before she died, I found an entry that made my hands go still. Called the bank again today. B has been asking about the trust. Told him it is not his concern. He brought up the money I lent him in 2019, says I promised to forgive it. I never promised. I have the email, worried about what happens when I am gone. Called Mr. A. Achterberg to make sure the account is protected. I sat on the floor of my mother's spare room with that notebook in my hands, and I understood for the first time that she had known. She had known what he was like. She had known it for years, and she had quietly, methodically done everything she could to protect what she wanted to leave me. She just hadn't told me because she hadn't wanted me to spend her last years worrying about it. I took photographs of every relevant entry in every relevant notebook, 16 pages in total. I sent them to Mr. Achterberg that evening. My brother did not take what came next well. When his own lawyer informed him that the trust funds had been formally released to me, that his attempt to access the account had been documented and reported to the bank's fraud department, and that there was now a paper trail connecting him to a loan he had received from our mother. $46,000 documented in her notebooks and in a series of emails that I had found when I went through her computer. He called me. He was not quiet this time. He said things I will not repeat here. He said I had gone behind his back. He said I had always been her favorite, had always gotten more than my share, had always made him feel like an outsider in his own family. He said I had turned a simple matter into something ugly. I let him finish. And then I said, very calmly, I have copies of the notebooks. I have copies of the emails. I have the bank's record of your visit. If you'd like to take this to court, you are welcome to do that. He hung up. I sat in my kitchen in Guelph for a long time afterward. It was late April by then, and the light through the window was finally starting to feel like spring. I made myself a proper meal for the first time in weeks. Nothing fancy, just pasta with a jar sauce and a salad, and I ate it at the table where I'd gotten the phone call in February, and I thought about my mother. I thought about how she used to make her tea too strong and then complain it was bitter. I thought about the way she laughed, a real laugh, from somewhere low in her chest. I thought about the butter tarts she'd made at Christmas, slightly overdone the way I always liked them, and how I hadn't known at the time that it would be the last batch. I missed her so much it felt like a physical weight, and I was so grateful she'd been careful. I was so grateful she'd kept her notebooks. The house sold in May. I didn't contest it. It was his name on the will, and though Mr. Achterberg believed there were grounds to challenge, I didn't have the energy for another fight. What my mother had left me in the trust was enough, and more than enough, more than I'd expected. I thought for a long time about what to do with it. In the end, I used part of it to set up a small bursary at the community college in Barrie. The one that was close to our old neighborhood, the one my mother had always said she wished she'd had the chance to attend when she was young. I named it after her. It goes to mature students returning to school after time away, single parents, people switching careers, people who needed a second chance at something. My mother would have liked that, I think. She believed in second chances. She believed in them even when she probably shouldn't have. The rest I put toward a down payment on my place in Guelph. I've been renting for 6 years. In September, I'll have my own backyard for the first time in my adult life, and I've already decided I'm going to plant a small garden. Tomatoes, herbs, maybe some of those ugly heirloom things that taste better than they look. My mother always had a garden. I haven't spoken to my brother since the phone call in April. I don't know if I will. There are people who tell me I should try to repair it. That family is family, that he's the only one I have left, and maybe they're right. Maybe someday I'll feel differently. But right now, what I feel is clear and quiet and something I didn't expect. Free. Last week, I ran into one of my mother's old neighbors at the grocery store. A woman who used to bring over zucchini from her garden every August, more than anyone could ever reasonably eat. She hugged me for a long time and said my mother had always been so proud of me. She said it with such certainty that I had to look away. I thought about the notebooks about my mother sitting in her kitchen, writing things down in her small, neat hand because she wanted someone to know the truth someday. She made sure I'd be okay, even from the end, even when she couldn't tell me directly. I think about that every time I unlock the door to my apartment, my own key, on my own keychain, to a life that is mine.